Welcome back to the Dopesick Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer, and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. Also got a lot of stories about the crazy stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, Chris is a big dude. I mean, it was probably, I would say he was probably the strongest dude in the prison during the time that he was there. Without question. I'll get into him now. Hadn't even thought much about him. So I was talking with my buddy Pinto the other day. And it was Pinto Silly. Now, Chris was a Latin king. Now, prison to prison, place to place, politics to politics. You know, different gangs accept different, groups and stuff like that. At the medium security, there was a guy who was said he was blood. Bloods didn't let him hang. They didn't let him sit with him. They didn't have nothing to do with him at all. And he was probably getting more money than any of them. So, I mean, it's kind of an odd concept how that worked out. Now, something you would see, certain people that would get to slide, basically, that they wouldn't, they look past race and everything else. There was a factor. And you see this with a number of things. You see, people that were chomos and stuff like that get left alone for the same reason, which, it's if somebody looks like they're big and strong, or if they are strong, they're lifting a whole bunch of weight. People equate that to fighting ability, which it can, but I mean, it's not just a definite thing, okay? Some people I knew were stronger than could be, couldn't fight a lick. Chris was a big, giant dude. I mean, physically imposing. Like, the people that walk with their chest poked out? Okay, he's just standing there relaxed, and it looks like he's doing that. It's a big, big dude. Now, he worked as a cook in the kitchen, and he made a good bit of money, because the cook in the kitchen makes more money probably than anybody in the compound from what I saw. And the reason for that is the jobs in the kitchen are the cook can hand it to the kitchen workers. The kitchen workers strap it to their body, and they try to sneak it out of the kitchen past the gauntlet of guards, which are going to pat them down. They saran wrap these bags of meat to their body so it literally conformed to the shape of their body. But if it gets taken, well, they're just out of that money. Well, he works as the cook. So working as the cook, he would pass the trays of food to the kitchen workers for, like, let's say $5 for a tray, depending on what it was. And they'd have to get it past the guards, and they'd make 15 if they got it back to the unit. But if they lost it, no money. Okay? Now, he doesn't have any, overhead cost. He doesn't have to pay for the food. They just give him the food since he's the cook. So he doesn't have expenses. He just gets the food, in which he just sells. So it's not like, he has to put up money, take a loss, and all that. So that being the concept with the cooks, the cooks made a tremendous amount of money. There's one at the medium that literally had over $90,000 on his books. Been in prison 20 years, been a cook most of that time, and he had bundles of stamps, and it had like a marker written on it with how many dollars. Some of the maintenance guys found some of these saran wrap things full of stamps. Now, the low security mackerel's the money. Stamps almost weren't even used as money, which wasn't typical because most prisons, federal system, that's what's money. I mean, that's what it was. And something odd about that, there's like 48, 49 cent stamps back when I was in. I'm sure it's more than that now. Hadn't sent a piece of mail out since I can remember. But anyway, 3 of those stamps is a prison dollar. But these raggedy dollar stamps that were 20 years old and unusable also counted as a prison dollar. Now, that's a medium. At the low security, it's mackerel. They'd flatten them so they could fit more in the thing. They'd turn to jelly. You couldn't even eat them. But I mean, that's what money was. So he had that. He had the people in there that he sold to, but he also had people he had contracts with meat. Because, see, where these weights were at the low security, it was a culture of lifting and eating, and meat was a big thing. So he'd get contracts with people. They pay him so much a month. And, I believe it was, because I almost did one with him at one point. But, there was a guard that was working. It was too much because the guard found the meat in your room. And how you keep it cold, because people always ask that question, is they do have ice machines. Of course, once you put it in the ice, you salt the ice. It makes the ice into one block, and it keeps it cold. And that's what you do. You leave it in a little office trash can. Nobody uses it for trash. They use it as a cooler. And that's how you store it. But I believe he's doing like 80 or 100 a month. and he'd bring you like bag of meat. Like there was a certain schedule he had, so many bags of meat if you paid him to do it. But that was his main hustle. But like I said, he was a white guy, he was Latin King, but he's probably the strongest guy on the compound overall. You had people that would just do bench press. The guy I worked out with, Chicken Man could bench a lot. He could bench about 475. And he could hit on flat and on incline. He could hit 475, something like you had never seen. Now, he never did legs. I never saw him do legs, not a day. Not a day. Never saw him do back, shoulders, arms, chest. And that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people think, bench press means you're going to hit somebody harder. When ironically, a lot of fighters don't even do bench press because doing too much bench press can restrict the movement. It's a lot more shoulder and tricep, stuff that you see a lot of fighters do. It's an ironic thing. And, I tried telling a couple of people, just in conversation, it's like they didn't believe me that most fighters don't do it. I mean, shoot. But it's the truth. But that's what, somehow they think if you got a big bench press, you're going to punch somebody really hard. And I'm sure, having the shoulder and everything else into it, just overall people are stronger. But anyway, his numbers on the weight pile, if I remember correctly, have to ask Pinto about this. I'm sure he remembers too. This guy, Chris, he's in Virginia. I might be able to get him on here one day if he's willing to sit down and talk with me. But anyways, he bench pressed at the high end of the 400s, close to 500. He squatted right around 600, and he deadlifted at the high end of 600, closer to 700. Overall, he was I'd say about 230 pounds. Now, every year they had a bodybuilding competition, and people took that very seriously. Okay, it's a whole process into it to get to the lowest amount of body fat possible and doing the poses and all that stuff. And, pretty much you have shorts on and everything else. People usually like lift up pant leg. I never did bodybuilding thing. I wasn't going to do that. I didn't wrestle in high school, and I wish that I'd wrestled, but I couldn't get over the spandex, okay? Prancing around like that, it just wasn't something I could do. But anyway, it's a powerlifting thing. But during the time that he was there, he did that. Now, something that a lot of people didn't know about Chris, unless you actually knew him, was he used to be a big boy. Like, he used to be heavy, he used to be overweight. He was strong from the start whenever he lifted. But through the lifting, by the weights being there, he ended up getting really, really, really strong. But he started getting really, really, really fit, started eating healthy and everything else, seeing as how he had access to the kitchen. So this bodybuilding thing, there were a number of people that did it. There was a guy in the workout crew I was a part of at the time that did it. And they had different divisions, different weights, different things, it's different categories, different weights. They had the smallest division was like, I think it was like 130 pounds and under. And there was this little guy, Shorty, at commissary, this little Hispanic guy. That little guy was strong, but he got there, man, he was ripped up. He was a little tank. You wouldn't guess it. You just think he's just some little guy when you walk by him. But anyhow, Chris, whatever reason it was this particular time, he decided he was going to do the bodybuilding competition. He really put a whole lot of time into it, and he really put a whole lot of effort into it. But like I said, he used to be heavy. Now, something that people don't really, for whatever reason, people don't understand this. Okay, you can't just lose weight from a certain part of your body. Like doing sit-ups ain't going to burn fat off your stomach. It make your abs stronger. Yeah, it might make them poke through fat a little bit more, but it ain't going to do that. Okay, and likewise, there are certain ways and certain things you can do to, lose in the appropriate way. But if you are a big, giant guy, to a certain bit, like he was, it sounded like he was heavy, and he ended up losing a bunch of it. Had a little extra down here, skin where he lost all that weight. So anyway, he took the time, he dieted and everything else. And I don't know the whole bodybuilding thing exactly how it works. I know you dehydrate, it's kind of like a weight cut for, MMA and all that. You can lose about 15, 20 pounds of water weight. And how it's done is this. They call it a water diet, or that's what I've heard people call it. So in preparation for this, on top of losing weight down to the lowest body fat percentage that they can possibly get to, they drink 2 gallons of water a day. Okay, tremendous amount. And then you drink 2 gallons of water a day every day for a few weeks straight. And then the week of, you go from 2 gallons one day, like a gallon and a half the next day, a gallon the next day, a half gallon the day after that, like a quart the day after that, and then like almost nothing 24 hours before. And something about, I don't know a whole lot about this either. The one guy who was in the one building, now this guy looked just like some business dude if you saw him, but every day they had this place called the Dungeon in Richmond Hall. It was just a dark corridor with a TV, but he'd be at the end of it, down at this end, locking his feet under something, doing sit-ups and stuff. This guy wasn't a big guy. Now, he was in they had kind of like a senior bodybuilding competition for the people that were older, so the older guys, some of the older guys would do that, and this guy would do that, and he didn't do any weights, this older guy I'm talking about. Older white guy, I think he's ex-military, probably, he's probably somebody a lot of people overlooked that was pretty dangerous if he wanted to be. But anyhow, he was talking about it, and they had these like pastries they gave out in the kitchen. They're like a honey bun type deal, but they had like cinnamon swirls and raspberry filling and all that stuff. He'd saved a ton of those, and he was going to eat a whole bunch of those because apparently you eat a whole bunch of sugar, and I think it makes the veins pop. He's explaining. I don't know how it works, but the guard took all of his. He was going to eat a ton of them the day before. The guard took them the day before. He ended up having to go to the store, man, getting a whole bunch of stuff. So people dehydrate. So basically, the water, all that water out of it makes everything look like you'd see. Some of these guys, you'd see the ripples, like the muscle fibers moving under the skin. Then eating that sugar or whatever, carbs, a whole bunch of carbs makes the veins pop off of you. And, I know he had to be proud of this, Chris did. Because like I said, it sounded like he used to be very, like he was like obese. Like he was overweight, and he got himself together to where he was lifting numbers that he could have done in competition. We didn't have protein shakes. We didn't have any of that stuff. No protein powder, no creatine, none of that. And this guy's numbers were literally competitive if he was in a powerlifting competition against actual guys that are taking, probably Tren and everything else. You know what I mean? I don't know much about steroids. I know that's supposed to be like the King Daddy one. You always see that Derek on More Plays More Days talking about Tren. That one's supposed to make people go crazy and everything. But anyway, if he was to do that, it's something that's wild. Some of these guys, they get out and they should do it. Like, they should do these competitions because I swear he'd probably make a living in that. But anyway, he done that. But, he wanted to take pride in how he looked, and he dieted down. He did this bodybuilding thing, and you could see a couple lines down in his stomach. But he did it. He got out there and he did it. And yeah, he turned himself around. This dude was an absolute animal, an absolute tank. Absolute freaking tank of a dude. Okay, when I talked about, pound for pound, being strongest white guy there based on a bodybuilding, or a powerlifting competition, that's bench plus squat plus deadlift divided by body weight. Okay, Chris wasn't there. Okay, whenever I was like considered that. Okay, even as heavy as he was, his numbers are still way more impressive than mine. Okay, mine was just impressive because I don't weigh a whole lot and I lifted a lot for my weight. Even weighing 230 pounds, his numbers were more impressive than mine. Like, I can't stress how incredible it was that he's lifting this much weight. Okay, naturally in there. Being that big of a force, yeah, people want that person on their team. So of course Latin Kings was, proud to have him as a member. And he was tattooed like all the way up. Kind of had like that strawberry blonde hair though. I was wondering because I didn't know a whole lot about that. I didn't know you could be like a Latin King if you were white or whatever. But his last name was an Irish name. Okay, he had an Irish last name, and he had that kind of reddish looking hair. And I'm thinking, what type of Spanish descent, Puerto Rican, whatever descent does he have? He don't look like he has a bit in him. But yeah, I guess there can be some white Latin Kings or whatever. And he was accepted. He was a cool dude, and he was wasn't loud. He's a real humble guy. You wouldn't ever hear him talking about. I had no clue he could lift that amount of weight. I was like, that's a big dude, but I wouldn't have guessed he was like the strongest guy there. I mean, about 6 foot tall, 230 pounds. This is a giant man. Like I said, because he had access to the kitchen, because he had access to however much meat he wanted, that was one of his secret weapons, one of his benefits. Me, I was eating 10 packs, sometimes 15 packs of mackerel a day. Pinto and tell you about that. He hated it because it was a dormitory type set, and I'd open them all up in the morning. I'd pour them in that bowl after draining that oil out, and it stunk a little bit. But he just had the bags of meat that he could get everywhere. That he could get in the kitchen anytime, and so yeah. He did his thing. But anyway, talking about people, just because people are big doesn't mean they can fight or anything like that. Sometimes something you'd see is people roughhouse. That's what people do, going to wrestle, everything else like that. It happens. So I remember one time there was this other giant dude, weighed more than him. And, they're just playing around and stuff. And this dude, thought because he weighed more than him, he might be able to do something with him. And man, he just it was like watching a bear get a hold of somebody. Like, he wasn't just big for nothing. He got a hold of this dude there wrestling, and he shook his arm by it and then popped him down on the ground, and this guy couldn't get up. He had him put down there, and he talked a little trash when he was doing it too. He wouldn't talk trash just out in the open, but in that, it was lying. I was like, shoot, man, big man can move. This guy was quick, okay? I mean, to be this guy could have been a professional athlete if he'd had the right people behind him growing up and everything else. Could have been a hell of a fighter too. I'm telling you, just with how just natural instincts, with how this man was big, and it was like he just, they're going at it, and he shook his arm by, got him in a bear, put him down, wasn't letting him back up. This guy couldn't do nothing with him at all, So anyway, yeah, pretty much. The strength, everything else, he wasn't only, accepted as, a member and recognized as that. He was respected and looked at by everybody as somebody is not to mess with. I can't remember somebody really picking a fight with him. I'm sure over time he probably had a story about that, but I can't personally remember it. He's one of those people that people leave alone, okay? They're deterrents. Big old dude with muscles popping off of him, tattooed, finger to neck, tattooed. It just gives like a look or whatever. But it's big, giant, mean looking dude. Nicest guy on the planet though. Nice. I mean, you couldn't meet a nicer guy. I mean, he talked to you about working out. He talked to you about whatever, nutrition. And he knew it. He taught himself. Nobody taught him any of that. And I'm sure he made him a good little chunk of change to get out with, and it sounds like he's doing well now. And I love hearing that. I love hearing about people getting out and doing well. A lot of the people that I tell stories about, I can't help but look up and see where they're at now, and a lot of them are right back in prison. That sucks. I hate to see that. It's hard to think. We went through all that time. You got through all that time. You got out. You had a chance, and you're back in prison now. It sucks to see, and there's a couple of them, that were like some of the best people you could meet in the world in there because they were sober, because they weren't on drugs, and they didn't have that BS going on with them. A lot of these people were addicts. A lot of these people, I'm sure, got right back on drugs, and I'm sure a lot of these people, the good people that I knew when I was in prison became bad people when they got back out on drugs. Some people do drugs and it's hopeless and this and that, and it's like me when I was on. I still was like, my mom talks about it because she hears about these other people and how awful the people get on drugs and how awful it turns them. Some people do different things, but some people, when they get on it, turn into something bad. And it's kind of why I've isolated myself a whole lot over the last few years. Just because I knew somebody in prison doesn't mean that they're going to be that same person now that they're out of prison. There's two different people that addicts can be, and that's something taken into account. Chris, I don't believe he had much addiction issues. I believe he was, hustling, and he got up pretty high in the ranks, and he got smacked down, by the feds, just like they get everybody eventually. And they'll find a way to get you in the end. But anyway, if you like the video, press the like button. If not, that's 20 minutes and 2 seconds of your life, and which you'll never get back. Got some interesting stuff happening this week. Got somebody I'm going to do some videos with here in a couple days. I think you guys are going to like it. I've got some great stuff planned. I've got some people lined up and some stuff going on, and it's going to be interesting. There's a whole lot I'm going to be putting back into this. As of this far, it's mostly just been me sitting in front of this camera telling a bunch of stories from when I was in prison and all the crazy stuff I did before prison. But be putting a whole lot into this here coming up. I hope you guys like it. That's it.